What if the African gods were never mere legends at all? What if they were living truths, deliberately erased from the story of humanity? Have you ever wondered why almost no one speaks of them today? Why the mighty deities who shaped entire cultures were turned into faint echoes, forgotten or demonized? Prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear can shift how you see every form of ancestral spirituality. For countless centuries, the African gods stood as the pillars of thriving civilizations. They were far more than symbols. Kings sought their guidance, warriors carried their names into battle, priests invoked their power, and even invaders feared their presence. Orishas, Vodun, and Kisi, sacred names that still carry hidden stories and spiritual legacies buried by colonization, slavery, and religious manipulation. The history written in official books, preached in colonial churches, and repeated in Eurocentered universities deliberately cut these deities out of the human record. Why? Because to recognize who the African gods truly are is to touch a power that frightened those who sought control. African spirituality is among the planet's oldest and most profound. It is a wisdom rooted in nature, the cosmos, and the divine spark within every person. A truth that threatened anyone who wanted to dominate minds and lands. Do you believe the Bible, Western history, or European religions tell the full story? What if many of the symbols, rituals, and even names used in Christianity have far older roots in African traditions? Hidden manuscripts, long-ignored documents, and secret reports reveal astonishing links between African gods and biblical characters you already know. This is no ordinary lesson. It is a revelation. By the time you finish, you may realize that much of what you've been taught about faith, power, and divinity was incomplete or carefully manipulated. If you've ever sensed a spiritual emptiness, if you yearn to know where your faith, your roots, your very soul come from, you are exactly where you need to be. Do not treat this like just another internet curiosity. Listen as one who seeks freedom, because this story was silenced, and today we speak it aloud. Africa is not merely a continent of fertile soil and striking landscapes. It is the cradle of humanity, the root of countless cultures, philosophies, sciences, and, above all, spiritual traditions older than memory itself. African spirituality is vast and timeless. It is not superstition, as colonizers tried to claim. It is a living science of the spirit, a real connection to the divine, to nature, and to the deepest parts of the human soul. Ancient peoples such as the Yoruba, the Kemetic Egyptians, the Ashanti, and the Bantu developed spiritual systems of astonishing sophistication. Every element of creation had consciousness and purpose. Nothing was separate from the sacred. The tree was holy. The river was holy. The drumbeat was a prayer. Dance itself was invocation. The name of an Orisha or a Vodun or an Kisi was not simply a label for some distant being. It was the name of a living energy, felt, heard, embodied. These spiritual systems guided medicine, astronomy, ethics, community life, and the education of the young. African spirituality was, and remains, a profound spiritual science. And here lies a truth few admit. Many of the structures we recognize in early Christianity and Judaism, ritual purification, sacred fasting, holy chants, incense, even the concept of a covenant, bear the unmistakable imprint of African traditions. When colonizers arrived, they did not merely seize land and enslave bodies. They waged war on the spirit. Temples were burned. Priests were killed or forcibly converted. Sacred symbols were branded as witchcraft. African gods were recast as demons. Have you noticed how, in much of Western Christianity, anything black, African, or ancient is equated with evil? That was no innocent misunderstanding. It was a strategy of control. The Bible itself has been translated, edited, and selectively curated to favor colonial power. Entire passages were hidden or removed. Names were altered. Ethiopia and other African nations appear repeatedly in Scripture, and African figures stand at the heart of pivotal biblical events, yet they are rarely acknowledged. Books that revealed too much about Africa's spiritual origins were left out of the canon altogether. Why? Because a people who stay connected to their gods, their rituals, and their ancestors cannot be truly conquered. But suffocation is not destruction. The seeds of spiritual truth never die. Perhaps your own soul remembers. Perhaps hearing the names of the Orishas or Vodun stirs something deep within you. Do not fight that feeling. The more we reconnect with these roots, the freer we become. Baptism, sacred water, incense, rhythmic chants, fasting. Africans practiced them all long before they appeared in Christian churches. Some even argue that the Ark of the Covenant itself carries African symbolism. This is not about diminishing anyone's faith. It is about widening the lens, remembering that the divine speaks in many tongues and wears many colors, and that many of those voices rise from Africa. Look closely and you'll see how thoroughly we've been trained to view history through a European filter, as if truth could only be born in the West. It is time to break that spell. African spirituality is not primitive. It is not mere folklore. It is sacred wisdom, a bridge back to what we were taught to forget. Consider now the so-called African gods. They are not mythological figures like Zeus or Odin, remote and human-like. They are living forces of nature. Spiritual intelligence is active in both the visible and invisible worlds. In the Yoruba tradition, they are called Orishas. In Dahomey, Vodun. In Congo and Angola, Nkisi. They are not gods in the Western sense, but conscious energies of creation. The Orisha is the fire that transforms, the river that nourishes, the wind that carries prayers, the earth that holds the dead and feeds the living, the lightning that delivers justice, the rhythm that keeps the universe alive. They are part of you, part of creation, part of the spiritual memory running in the blood of all who carry African heritage. When someone is called a child of Shango or Ashin, it does not simply mean an external devotion. It recognizes that person's inner resonance with a specific spiritual frequency, a mission, a destiny. Yet when Europeans first witnessed these rites, they did not seek understanding. They judged and condemned, calling them pagan, witchcraft, the devil's work, because they sensed the unbreakable power behind them. They knew that a people rooted in their spiritual identity cannot be enslaved in body or mind. African spirituality teaches that everything is spirit, everything is energy, and the Creator manifests in infinite forms. Humans are not born sinners but participants in creation, each with a sacred destiny, a personal spiritual head. Through ritual, offering, right words, and right actions, one can realign with that destiny. This focus on balance and responsibility is radically different from the Western idea of guilt and punishment. And the very elements European missionaries demonized, thunder, fire, sea, fertility, iron, are celebrated in the Bible as expressions of God's own power. What was exalted in Scripture was condemned in Africa simply because it wore an African name. Most African traditions also recognized a supreme creator long before Christianity. Among the Yoruba, this source is Olajumer or Olorin. Among the Fon, Mawulisa. Among the Bakongo, Nzambimpungu. Among the Ashanti, Nyam. One ultimate divine principle, beyond human comprehension, present everywhere. The Orishas and other deities are its aspects, not rivals. This completely overturns the colonial narrative that painted Africans as idol worshippers. Their concept of a single creator predates the arrival of missionaries by millennia. Notice how the Bible describes a God who creates heaven and earth, breathes life into humans, dwells not in man-made temples, and knows our hearts. Strip away later dogma and you will find a vision strikingly close to what African peoples have always believed. A God who is intimate, present in wind and rain, in the elder's wisdom and the child's laughter. The difference is that African spirituality never required a hierarchy to mediate the divine. The connection was direct, alive, joyous. That freedom was far too dangerous for colonizers to allow.